Welcome to the meat of the matter. The boys are here. We are not live today. We are going to be talking about some stuff about what could possibly help hang you up on a carnivore diet. When you've started this animal-based diet, you're going full throttle. Whoops, things get in the way. What are they? Life factors, dietary, maybe some distractions with family, friends, food noise, all of that stuff we're going to address. That's Mark. He's Peter. I'm Tony. And we do this. We do a live podcast every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Holland time in the Netherlands, and 6 p.m. UK Irish time. And just how you doing, boys? Ready to talk about some carnivore hangups?
Ready to go again.
Yeah, always.
Peter, let's start, man. What do you think the biggest when someone decides to go, whether it's full into carnivore, what do you think is the biggest hang up? What do you think is the biggest roadblock?
Oh, yeah. So I actually go into this question unprepared, but I think it's everywhere. Like as soon as you start thinking too much, then it can go wrong. So the source can be even the carnivore dieters themselves. So carnivore influencers focusing on certain things. It can be scientific research, and then I'm talking in particular about these population research type of studies. It can be other influencers outside the carnivore space, people focusing on cholesterol. If you're a type 1 diabetic, even or diabetic in general, those things can be confusing as well, because what's the balance? Like, do you go for all the benefits of carnivore? Initially, maybe you get slightly worse blood glucose control because it's all new, this diet, and you get to deal with protein and that sort of stuff. So that can bring you off course. All kinds of things. I think a lot of other items will pop up in my head during this episode, but everywhere, basically, where you start thinking and analyzing too much, that's where the problem is. So it can also be the scale in the bathroom, and you see that your weight goes up, that sort of things. If you try to reason it too much and make decisions based on that immediately, that can be very dangerous. It's not necessarily bad, of course, but it's good to think about what you're doing, but not too much.
I think, yeah, it's a lot of nuance. But Mark, what do you think?
I think the biggest factor is the variety. Like, people just can't get into their head that they're actually eating less food. Like, they're only picking, like, say, red meat, eggs, pork, just basically meat. I think that variety factor is what scares people. Like, they're not having the vegetables anymore. They're not having the carbohydrates. They're not having the sodas. Like, all of that is gone. It's just like, it's all stripped back. It's all just basic stuff. Unless you're going down the keto approach, where you can add in, like, say, grains and seeds and vegetables and stuff like that if you want to. But I think the biggest factor is variety. I think another big factor is that if you're living in a household where you have family, and the other part of the family are just eating their normal meals, and you're just sitting around just eating carnivore, that can be a big obstacle for many people. I know a lot of people that I work with struggle with that. They have a heavy work day, and then they go home and they want to spend some time with the family. They want to sit down and have a meal with the family, and they just can't get their head around that they're just eating meat, whereas everybody else is just having like a big buffet. They're eating like the potatoes, the vegetables, the everything else, and that's a huge factor. And like what Peter said, also another big factor is the cholesterol. Obviously, the amount of fat that you're eating. People just can't get it in their head that, okay, if I just eat too much fat, this is actually going to help me. It's going to reduce inflammation. It's going to help with my mental health. It's going to get rid of all that joint pain. People just can't get past that.
Yeah.
So there's many ways that gets in the way.
And I mean, I think you make a great point there. It's like, why are you doing this? And unfortunately, we can all believe what the proper human diet is, but we all have to live. We all have families. We all have partners. And specifically, I find it with moms, like, that are trying to feed their kids. And then they start, and I think this comes up quite a bit, is well, if I start learning about this way of eating and I start realizing how beneficial it is, and I actually get past what I'm going to be missing out on, and now I'm feeding my kids this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very conflicting because, like I used to think craft dinner wasn't too bad. I used to think that like these instant soup or the soups, the condensed Campbell soup in a can was good. And when you start dissecting what it is, and I think that can be very scary, specifically for moms. And I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's an interesting example. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Pierre.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that it's an interesting example, these moms feeding their kids, because you hardly find them, the people that feed their kids fully carnivore diet. I think there exist a few examples, but most of them, I know them also from nearby, from my son. They feed them also vegetables, and typically also at school they allow for the almost processed type of food sometimes. And it's a difficult question, I think. I'm curious how you two think about that. But the fact that you want to show children also what bad foods can do, and to not be too restrictive, that's a difficult thing.
Yeah, I had this conversation with my parents a few years ago when I came into carnivore, and I understood basically what carnivore could do for people. And it's very, very hard to tie that around when you've got a daughter that when they go up to their grannies, the grannies just like to spoil them. They just like to feed them, give them as much food as possible, and just basically look after them. And I have nothing against that. And it's just trying to get that balance between the two of them. But I just think it just comes down to just having that talk and just trying to explain to them, like, listen, like, maybe we can go down this route, but maybe if we just look at a healthier option. So instead of just giving them the processed food, maybe just give them some sort of food that has carbohydrates in it, but it's just going to be a little bit more healthier. Until they actually make that decision themselves to say, you know what, no, I actually don't like this. I'm actually going to eat what you're eating. And that's where I found that it's just about education.
Well, I have a couple opinions. I mean, I'm obviously not a father, so I don't want to offend anybody, but I like to put things into perspective and a different way of looking at it. And if you look at nature and you look at animals in nature, they know what to do. They eat a specific diet and they will go miles. They'll migrate for it. They know exactly what's going on. And I'm not saying kids don't deserve treats once in a while, or, but where is that coming from? Are we rewarding with, harm? And what I believe is like our way of, we're not any different as far as being an animal. There is a proper diet for all of our species, and we can argue it till the cows come home, no pun intended. But it really doesn't change through our lives. Like what we require and the essential nutrients don't change in puberty, in pregnancy. Maybe you may require a little bit more of something that you always need, but it's kind of like we've been like, as we get older, we change our diets, or you need more of this as you get. But I mean, and that's where I'm kind of like, this diet works from out of, like, obviously off of infancy, after breastfeeding. This is the way to eat.
That's a nice thing. And let me throw in one confounder on this point, and that are the carbohydrates. And I hear it a lot in the diabetes community as well. People think that children especially need carbohydrates because they are growing. There's this idea that you need carbohydrates for muscle growth, that sort of things. And children are very active, so where do they get their energy from? And that can be a very complicating factor, I think, for parents as well, because you don't want to deprive them of anything essential. And who knows, maybe they can be slightly beneficial to some degree if you add in a few carbohydrates, like in a more appropriate way, of course.
Well, exactly. I mean, if we can just take ourselves out of that equation and use carbohydrates as a tool in certain situations, but if we look at nature again, the only time humans have a complete macro variable diet is when we're breastfeeding. There's carbohydrates because the babies, and that explains something, because the baby's going through rapid growth spurts, rapid development outside the womb.
That's
And
actually a good point as well,
it
because
makes perfect sense that there'd be some sugar in the breast milk to develop the brain, which is we know is like the energy pig of our metabolism. So that and then after that, and then we get back to, like, I hear it all the time. I know we've been probably with Bart K saying there is no requirement for 1 exogenous gram of carbohydrate ever, but that doesn't mean they can't.
It's not exogenous in this case.
Yeah, but they can't use it, right? Like, so we know kids are resilient. We know kids, but I'll tell you what, any parent will probably vouch for this one, because I've been to family outings. You get the kids hopped up on sugar, watch what happens. They just start flying around. And I mean, is that, once in a while?
And the problem is there's just too much choice.
Yeah.
Way too much choice. Like, you look at what's going on now. Kids just have so much in front of them. It's not like, okay, I'll only have a little bit. It's like when we get to these parties, like you have these events like Halloween, Christmas, all this kind of stuff. Like, you've got Easter now in a couple of weeks' time. Kids are going to be getting, like, say 9, 12 Easter eggs.
Yeah, I remember how many chocolate bunnies I got. Was like was it a good Easter? I got 60 chocolate bunnies. That was a good Easter. Like,
and and you see this over in my country, where they'll actually show pictures on Facebook of their parents showing what they got their kids, and you're looking at the amount of chocolate these kids have, and these kids are only, like, say 4 or 5 years of age. They don't know any better.
Yeah, and then
this is why the parents have to take a grasp on this, and they have to learn.
We're not saying anything against, like, man, I don't know, because I'm not a parent, but it is hard, and this is a decision where, quite often, I just want to tie it back into the carnivore hangups and the hookups, is you got to be sort of selfish in your own health, but obviously your kids are going to be a factor in that. But that's quite often what happens is we wait till we're desperate, and then it's like, oh my Lord, I'm something's wrong with me. I need to fix it. And it's like the ones that can get ahead of that, like just human nutrition. And I mean, obviously there's gray everywhere, and it's not black or white, but I think focusing specifically for kids, because they need essential nutrients too, essential amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, and minerals. So I'm
actually talking to a woman at the moment. Her son was diagnosed with ADHD in the last 4 years, right? Now, he's been looked after by a dietitian. I only spoke to this woman 2 weeks ago, and I've been in regular contact with her. She showed me the child's diet. Tony, I'm not even joking with you. It's absolutely horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. There's no protein on it whatsoever. There's no nutritional value on it. I had to explain to this woman. I actually had to get onto a call with this woman, and I had to explain to her, listen, what's going on. She couldn't believe it. She thought that sugar was normal. It's a food. We were on that call for nearly an hour, and I told her, I said, listen, you need to listen to what I'm telling you. The reason why your child is having this behavior, because this child is actually hitting his own mother. He's hitting his own. He has this aggressive behavior, and it's really, really bad. Yeah. And I said to her, I said, listen, this is not your fault. None of this is your fault. When I looked at the diet, I was so angry. I said to her, like, listen, I would love to speak to this dietitian. I would love to speak to him.
Right. And I mean,
horrendous.
And to be, Peter, I have a question for you, Peter, in 1 second. I just wanted to, because Mark, you hit something there with me. I had a couple of friends of mine that were from Chile, and they were staying, and I did an interview with them because they were vegan vegetarian. They weren't opposed to eating eggs and cheese, but they were vegans when I met them. They saw how I was eating, and they ended up staying with me before they left for a few weeks, because they were just between places and we had to get them to the airport. We did an egg challenge. I got them eating like carnivores, but there was eggs. So Frankie was eating 18 eggs a day. Sunshine was eating, I think, 12 to 15 eggs a day. And then they were having whatever veggies, just no carbs. Within 7 days, this was 3 years ago, they still eat eggs, that many eggs a day. Like, they have not changed. Frankie told one of his sister's friends who had a child who was on the spectrum, He wouldn't make eye contact. You couldn't touch him. Like the child was aloof, and it was sad. When he started telling her about how he cut out sugar and how sugar was such a problem, they cut sugar out of the child's diet, carbohydrates, grains, sugar. Within 3 days, the child was hugging his parents and looking them in the eyes. That's fantastic. That's amazing. And that's the shit that we need to tell people, because
absolutely, 100%.
It can be so profound, especially with kids. And 100%. Peter, from a diet. Yeah. Sorry, go on, Peter. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, Mark, you talked about this diet, but maybe for the viewers that have children with ADHD themselves, could you tell us what this diet looked like, more or less?
Yeah,
I mean, probably there was a lot of sugar as well, but.
So the first meal, the child was having Cocoa Puffs.
Oh yeah,
glass of orange juice.
Of course.
Okay, that was the first meal.
I'll play by play that, Mark. Sugar. Okay, go on.
Yep. Then then they could have snacks. They could have whatever they want. They were bringing in jelly beans, jelly tots, all that kind of stuff.
Sugar.
For lunch, they were having pasta.
Right.
Okay, with tomato sauce. Yeah. Very little protein. Extremely low protein. And they were having another orange drink. For snack, they would be able to snack on fruit. A lot of fruit. Okay. Now this child was in a creche. So you know what I mean? And then when you looked at the dinner, again, it could have been spaghetti bolognese, it could have been a curry, it could have been whatever. And I was actually shown a photograph of this mother's child. This mother's child, okay, is 10 years of age. Okay. He weighs 9.5 stone. I don't know what that is in pounds. 9.5 stone. Right?
What's stone? 14 pounds, isn't it?
14 pounds. I think it's about 140 pounds, something like that. 140. Right? He's only 10 years of age. But the worst thing about it was, as I said, his behavior. He actually hits his mother. Non-stop. They've actually paid for a TV in the last 2 years 4 times, because he's actually picking the TV off the wall and broken it.
Do you know what the dietitian recommends, and her original dietitian? I hope she dismissed this dietitian by now, but
no doubt.
It's honestly, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And when I spoke to this woman and said to her, like, listen, like, I know this sounds bonkers. I know you're probably not going to believe me, but it's the sugar.
Yeah.
She was absolutely amazed when I kept on speaking to her. I was like, listen, it doesn't make a difference what carbohydrate you're eating. It doesn't make a difference. Like, to be honest with you, fructose is even more powerful.
Yes, it's damaging your liver. Like, that's
it's more powerful. The sweetener, it's more powerful. She could not believe the amount of information I was giving her.
Yeah.
Like, there was so much that she learned out of our conversation. Yeah. That when she came out of it, she was like, you know what? I'm actually going to do this. Because at the end of the day, us as parents want the best for our kids.
Of course.
And like, at the end of the day, we were taught no different. Like, when I look back 20 years ago, and we were taught about the food pyramids, and we were taught about carbohydrates and sugars and eating everything in moderation, none of us knew better, because we were all led to believe that these are the experts, these have our best interests. When we get sick, we go to our doctor, he looks after us. It's only until when we start getting older, and we all went through the same thing. We all went through the mental health issues, the metabolic issues, Peter with his diabetes. It's only until you get older and you actually realize, okay, listen, I've done everything, but I still have these problems. I still have these major problems. So if I don't get to the end of this, then I'm going to be in the doctor's hands for the rest of my life.
Yes.
Do I want to do that, or do I want to take control of this situation myself?
That's good. This is an interesting perspective.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Go on, Peter, because
that
about the doctors, like you put, what would happen if you were in the doctor's hands, which is a hardcore carnivore hang up. People get just railroaded by one lab result or one lab test. They get stopped. You got this is killing you now. You're feeling better, but no, it's bad. Peter, what would have happened if you put your
Yeah, so if doctors would decide for me, let's say let's describe it like that, then I would be on statins far before even considering my A1C value. I would be on a moderate medium carb diet. Let's be on the positive side. I don't know. I would have half yearly checkups of my cholesterol numbers, my kidney function, because the doctors will expect a progressive disease. So 1 year my kidney function will deteriorate, and the next year the eye doctor will see retinopathy, that sort of things, and then we'll have to act on that, and it's a continuous story. That's basically what happens. But yeah, let me get back very briefly to what you said, Mark. That I like this idea very much. At least that came up in my mind. That is when you talked about these children with ADHD, and the same could hold for diabetes as well. Sometimes these children, what you see there, it is like a magnifying glass of what you see in the course of decades with ourselves.
Yes.
So I've seen it with my diabetes when I was 18, 20 years old. I, in fact, got a blood glucose test at the doctor, and it was slightly elevated. For a young guy, it was like 8 millimoles in the morning after eating, okay, but still, that sort of things. And but it goes so slowly, and it was still inside the reference range, so you don't do anything about it, and you feel okay. I didn't feel bad at all. And then it continues and continues.
Well,
so their doctors don't do anything, and then later on they do way too much. So it's
Yeah. What about you, Tony? Where would you have been if you didn't take matters into your own hands?
My story was not type 1 diabetic, but I was type pre-diabetes, so type 2 diabetic with that. And I mean, if anybody wants to hear my story, just I say this quite often. She said, "There's nothing you can do. You're going to have type 2 full-blown type 2 diabetes, and it's going to get progressively worse. It's just the way it is. And I was like, what? And the same kind of thing, man. I couldn't move. I was all over the map with pain, and it was like they were talking things like fibromyalgia and retinopathy, and I'm just like, this is not, come on, it can't be. And when I started feeling better, I was like, and I'm now at the point where there is not one doctor, aside from maybe some of the carnivore space doctors, that I would even remotely talk to about lifestyle practices and diet. I'm not saying that I wouldn't go to a doctor if I broke my arm or had a serious infection or some emergency. But as far as lifestyle, I am and that conversation changed my life, because I have done everything my nutrition school said not to, my doctor said like would be inevitable, and it's just you can't deny it. And I mean, the only shitty part is like we say, when people are starting this way, it can be very scary. And I think that's a big hang up is it because you've got some momentum, you're trying something with a leap of faith, and you're learning, and then you're hearing it from all these different sides. Sometimes somebody is so that video that you posted today, Mark, it's like, fiber is the new protein, shit like that. Just absolutely hit the wall, and you go back the other way because you're freaking out. And then, you get a doctor visit, and the doctor scares you, but they have no other choice because they have to follow standard of care. So that is, to me, tying this in, is the biggest problem is really taking it in your own hands and using discernment to navigate the space. And now I'm a coach. I know Mark, you coach. Peter, you help people. This is where we come in. And honestly, I don't care about you becoming my client. I encourage people to get help with people they resonate with.
100%. Yeah.
Follow a plan with them, because you can guide them to certain ways. And quite often when I help people, and look at what we've just talked about, shit, man, when someone's coming in fresh, you got to talk about insulin, you got to talk about glucose, what carbohydrates are, what fiber is, you got to bust a bunch of myths. So this whole process, and I do give kudos to the people that try it on their own, but some people need the help. And that's when a coach, I think, is very much, because I'm telling you, a dietitian, look at Mark, what you said, is just going to talk about calories. Like it's energy in and out. They don't talk about essential nutrients or protein. Eat healthy, exercise. The nutritionist is going to be pushing the supplements. And I know from experience, nutritionists are usually plant-based, eat 6 to 11 servings of grains a day, following the guidelines. Now, you know, most of the coaches in this space are very nuanced. Like, and I believe that if you find, if Mark really, if you listen to Mark's stuff or listen to Peter's stuff and you really trust them and you really work with them, and that's the way to progress. Because I just had right now, you know, 3 of my clients with high LDL, and I had to talk them off the ledge because it's scary. You know, when we've been programmed for our lives, you know, eggs are bad, eggs are cholesterol, you know, that's kind of what I think. So, I mean, I do believe in taking it in your own hands. We have to. No one's coming to save us. But if you need some help because you're really deciding, it's so hard to navigate, because, you know, like we do all the time, we talk about these people that are, you know, if someone says calories in, calories out, doesn't matter, run away from them. Well, I would say the exact opposite. So, you know, you're going to have to take a leap of faith. And I think that's a big hang up in this space.
And that's the reason why I keep on doing my videos, because I know when I get a few messages off like strangers that I've never met them in my life, but they're following me. Yeah. They're following me for a reason. Yeah. They're following me because they're hearing a different voice. Yeah. They're like, you know what, I'm hearing all the stuff on social media, but you're the only one that's going against it. You're the only one that's fighting against these people. And what you're saying actually makes sense.
Sugar is actually good for you. Your body needs glucose for cognitive functioning. Low blood sugar levels lead to cortisol spikes, and diets like keto, zero carb, or carnivore put you in a state where your adrenal glands are working overtime in order to compensate for low blood sugar. If that's the case, then why do we always hear negative things about sugar? There are many reasons for this, but a big one is that high fructose corn syrup, the most refined processed form of sugar, is bad for you. Other forms of sugar like cane sugar or honey or sugar from fruits is good for you. Also, diets like keto and carnivore tend to make people feel better than average because they involve such a profound elimination effect where you're getting rid of other things that are bad for you. So perhaps there's a balance here where we
saying to me, Mark, I've been following you now for a couple of weeks. I took on your advice. I'm a different person. That just makes me feel incredible. Because as I said, if I have the power to wake up tomorrow morning and do a video, and it's going to change one person's life, just one person, my job is done. Yeah, my job is done, and I'm gonna feel accomplished.
Yeah, and you know, I was kind of like in social media. I was, you know, it's hard because I've seen so much profound change with some of the people I know, like you guys, and some of my clients that have, you know, done the impossible. Really, like in the medical in the medical faculties, this would be these things are deemed impossible, and I've seen it happen, and it's really hard to hold back. And you know, I appreciate you, Mark and Peter, because Peter, you're necessary for all the type 1 diabetics out there. You're not a doctor, you're not a scientist, but the work you've done and the wisdom and the knowledge you can share, that's the power. And you know, I think things are changing slowly but surely. But I mean, your story, Peter, like just how you've come about this, man, and you've got this Dutch charm that's unprecedented too. So that helps.
Guys, this is a hard one. I have an important announcement to make, so I'll be doing it in English this time. I recently got my cholesterol numbers back, and although they looked great, there was this one elevated number. And after ample consideration and a lot of research, I decided to stop the carnivore diet and switch to a Carnivore Diet. From now on, it's corn only. Wish me luck.
Peter the
I
carnivore.
always thought that Dutch people were quite direct and rough, but
Yeah. Well, that's and that's I think a big deal. And Mark, I give props to you because what drew me to you is your no bullshit sort of laying it all the line. Because I was kind of, I don't want to say sugarcoating it, but I was finding it hard. I didn't want to offend anyone, and I didn't want to it was just, and you know what? That was to my fault, because now I'm at the point where no, this is absolutely wrong. And when people ask me a question, it's like, it's pretty much, I tell them how it is.
But see, the reason why I did it, I said to myself, I was like you, Tony. I said, I was like, you know what, I don't want to go on social media. Like, I'm very, very shy behind the camera. But what led me to do it was, if I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nobody else is going to do it. As I've mentioned many times, I live in a country where nobody talks about keto and carnivore. Nobody. And it's very, very unfortunate that like the percentage of people that do it over here is 0.11%, is 0.00%.
Yeah.
It's like it's extremely low. And I feel like if I have to be the only one to do it, well, then I'm going to do it, because I know I'm not doing this like what Tony mentioned. I'm not doing this for gratitude or to make a lot of money. I'm doing this because I genuinely care. I've seen a lot of people hurt since COVID. I've seen a lot of people struggle since COVID. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I refuse to sit back anymore and watch these people suffer.
Yeah.
I don't know it all. That's why I listen to you. That's why I listen to you guys. I listen to you. I listen to a lot about what Peter talks about. He knows more about diabetes than I do. I listen to the big guys, Shafee, Ken Berry. I don't know it all. But what I can tell you is that I know for a fact, I know enough to change your life. I know enough to make sure that you don't need to be on medication. I know enough that you don't need to be in the doctor's hands for the rest of your life. And that's the difference.
And Peter, like with you, obviously you need insulin. Like, you need to have it. This is something that you have. But how do you feel, like you even spoke about it before, about like other conditions, they would have prescribed you other drugs. But what do you think about a type 1 diabetic standpoint? And before you answer that, I just want to let everybody know, Peter's only difference is he has to monitor his insulin. His diet is the same pretty much as Mark and I. So that's kind of what I wanted from a diabetic standpoint. What do you feel about lifestyle medication? And is that a hang up for carnivores or diabetics? You know what I mean?
So you're talking about Ozempic type of things. Do I agree with?
Yeah. Like, I mean, the easy way out. I don't want to minimize that, but the easy way out if you're a type 1 diabetic.
Oh yeah, it's a difficult story in the case of diabetics, because I do think that there is a place if you are severely type 2 diabetic initially, that there might be a place to use medication. Metformin is a clear example, but even Ozempic, GLP-1 agonists, and of course insulin as well, because in general, of course, as a type 2 diabetic, you are far on the road, of course, if you are using insulin, but there is a place, but it has to be used in a manner to go to a new situation where you don't need them anymore, and that involves physical adaptation and also a learning process. And if you're just going to use GLP-1 to solve it and say like, okay, maybe even my blood glucose average has become sort of okay again, then I'll just stick to the GLP-1 agonist. That's not a good approach. I mean, maybe in some very exotic genetic disorders, there might be a place for it, but generally speaking, it's type 2 diabetes. It's maybe a bit of an unpopular opinion, but yeah, in a way, it's not truly a disease, because if you omit the carbohydrates, you will typically see that it disappears. And
Yeah. I think insulin in general is like, I mean, obviously the awareness of insulin resistance is coming up to a thing, but people sometimes think that insulin is bad, and it's not bad. It's just severely misunderstood. We need it. Like it's not that you don't want any insulin. You do actually need insulin. It's not,
but just to put some numbers on it, and I will tell more about it maybe another time, but I have done a sort of scientific experiment, and the result of it anyway was that I became temporarily insulin resistant. And that meant that my insulin needs per day went from the typical 20 or 25, that's also usual for a healthy non-diabetic person. It went up to about 60, 70. And I felt like crap. I felt fat, unclean.
Yes,
I felt dirty. I felt like warm.
Right, Peter, I'm not laughing at you.
Hyperinsulinemia. It's really once you. I mean, I experienced it within in the course of a few days. This difference. So I really felt it.
Just for the record, sorry to cut you off, Peter, I just want to let everybody know we're doing an episode on exactly what Peter's story was. We'll have it out in the next week or two. We're going to call it Peter Goes Bananas. We'll get into it because, it's fascinating things. If you are a blood sugar, insulin numbers kind of person that wants to understand how it works, it'll be fascinating. So we will do that.
But the dangerous thing about this whole insulin stuff is that it's nice, of course, as a type 1 diabetic that I can see how much I administer, but I'm using like 20-25, as I said. But if you look at a typical type 2 diabetic, especially if he has got the wrong doctor, they are using entire insulin pens. Like they need higher concentrations of insulin. I'm using U100. In my opinion, it should be U50 or U40, like they use for pets, for animals.
Yeah.
But for those type 2 diabetics, they use U200.
And the problem is they're not allowing insulin to come down.
No,
that's the problem.
No.
The insulin has been chronically elevated. So when Tony mentioned about insulin, yes, insulin is not the problem. What is the problem is chronic inflammation.
Exactly.
That's the problem. So
and it's funny because
that's the problem.
And Peter, you could vouch for this. Like a severe type 2 diabetic, how is it the same if it's not? Because I have a problem with calling them the same disease because they're kind of completely different. But how is the treatment for severe type 2 more insulin when it's the problem?
Yeah.
And
let me just give away one thing of who knows the next episode or when we talk about this, is that I experienced hyperinsulinemia for about a week or so. And basically I was eating some carbs, but in terms of calories, not so much more. But my insulin levels were sky high. I saw the
picture.
And but I gained weight. And okay. It might have been also a bit of water, sure, but still, this little bit of calories in addition to my diet suddenly became a disaster, because if I would have added a pack of butter, which I do often, also for long periods of time, nothing happens. My insulin resistance doesn't go up. I don't feel like crap. My weight stays the same, and now. With some fruit, it's just a totally different story.
Wow. Well, insulin. You know what? I look forward to that because we're gonna call it Peter Goes Bananas because he just did this experiment, which is fascinating. And then Mark and I can kind of sit back and watch the glucose roller coaster ride, no pun intended. But I want to bring this back into carnivore hangups. Now, you mentioned something. Look at what happened just in that little bit of an addition or a takeaway. Quite often people focus on what they're going to be missing out on. And then they go full on into carnivore, maybe even a bit too early. And then they start flip-flopping back like a cheat meal day. So look at what that just did by just incorporating a little bit of fruit or some sugar into your diet or carbohydrates into a diet. And you were tracking it. But Mark, what do you find about, how do you feel about that? Because that's a big thing that people can't let go of, the fact that, oh, this, how long do I have to be super strict, and what happens when we flip flop?
Yeah, see, what that is, that's an addiction.
Mm.
That all comes back to being addicted to something. So if you're addicted to alcohol, you're not going to say to somebody, listen, okay, you're going to have 5 days a week where you're going to stick to no alcohol, but at the weekend you can have a drink or two. Nobody's going to say that. If you have a gambling problem, you're not going to say to somebody, listen, 5 days out of the week, 6 days out of the week, I want you to stay strict. But then on the Sunday you can go off and do your gambling. It's never going to work, never. And this is what happens with so many people. You have to let it go.
Yeah.
You're not missing out on anything. So all these cheap meals, having these parties at the weekend, you're not missing out on anything. What you're doing is you're actually poisoning your body. You're making things worse. If you want to get healthier, you have to knock it on the head.
Yeah.
Otherwise, because that like what we've all mentioned, and Peter will go into this next week. Once it gets a hold of you, it's very, very hard to get rid of it, because addiction is so powerful. And I actually noticed this a couple of months ago as well, when I introduced sodas back into my diet. When I went for a long
diet
time
soda,
without
then
sugar. Yeah. And this was like full of aspartame, like a lot of sweeteners. I brought this back in after a couple of months. Within an hour, I felt my mental health going to shit. I was really aggressive. I wanted to start a fight with somebody. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. So it's just an addiction. You have to let go of it very, very quickly.
Well, let me tell you that when I introduced some carbs, in terms of aggressiveness, without going into further details, and no people involved, sure, but let's say material, I can confirm that it does crazy stuff with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's
and you really notice it. You really notice it when you introduce it back in. It's like, okay, I used to drink these like nonstop, and it didn't have any effect on me at all.
Yeah.
But when I introduced it after going a long time without sugar, that's when I actually noticed, okay, now I understand what this does. Now I know how powerful this shit is.
And what was the reason that you introduced it?
I just brought it in because I just fancied I just fancied it. Because I thought I wouldn't do any damage. I thought I'd be fine. I thought I'd be one of those people that I could moderate having a little bit of sugar here and there, like likes of what's his name, Saladino. I always thought that I could just be a moderator, have a little bit of fruit around my workouts, have a little bit at the weekend, I'll be completely fine. Never worked, because every time the minute I had that little bit of sugar, the minute I had that sugar rush, I just wanted more. I felt like an addict. I wanted more of it. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
You know what's funny about that too is that people, I believe, have to be very, very vigilant about this, because what happens. They call it whatever you want to call it, the carb creep. You have one thing, and then you don't even realize all of a sudden you're eating carbs for a week. Now people will say, "Oh, that is arguably sugar addiction." It's if you're not even in control or you're unaware of it, and you're all of a sudden you find yourself like completely off the rails, and like, how did that happen? That's an aspect. Sometimes it's not immediate. It's just, it's really, really, I think a lot of people fall off quickly, and then they don't realize the actual stuff. So obviously the longer you're fat adapted, the more you're aware of yourself and these triggers. Because I can eat ice cream once in a while, but I eat it for a reason. It's because I love it. And I want it
because it's your choice. Yeah, it's your choice.
And I can have ice cream once a month or once every 2 months, and it's okay. But for me, that's me. That's not everybody.
And it's funny that you started talking about this, because I was about to say the same, but then from a different angle. But in the end, maybe still the same. I wanted to say that for some people it is possible to do these things after a long time. Then you have to be vigilant. That's true, but sometimes you can do things like For example, in my case, introduce a banana during a long cycle ride. I know that it doesn't affect me mentally, and after the ride, I've totally forgotten the banana, both mentally and physically.
Yeah.
So that's perfectly fine. And some people can also do carb cycling even. Well, I cannot imagine it, but like in the weekends they do it. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to take those as an example because it may not apply to yourself. That's the problem.
And can I just add in one thing as well? Like, because I hear an awful lot of this from like a lot of people that just talk shite. A lot of people will say that, oh, but athletes do this. Athletes have the energy drinks, they have the carbohydrates. These can actually burn it off. They're paid to burn this shit off. So when they're having their carbohydrates before a match, they're running around for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So their glycogen levels are going to be empty by the time they're finished.
Yeah.
You are different. You are completely different. You are not an athlete.
Yeah.
You're not an athlete. You cannot go by, and this is why when you see all this marketing shite on TV that Lucozade is great for your energy, all this crap, and they see all these athletes doing it. People are like, oh, I'm like that. I'm an athlete. I go to the gym once a day for an hour. The problem is a lot of people do not train with intensity in the gym. I see so many people in the gym sitting around doing fuck all, doing nothing. If you're going into the gym and you're training like Dorian Yates and you're training with like intensity, then maybe, yes, you can get away with maybe a little bit of carbohydrate before your workout, a little bit. But if you're going into the gym and you're thinking that I'm just going to do a few sets here, I'm going to do a few sets here, I'm going to go for a little run, I can have a bottle of Lucozade before my training, cop on to yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that's what we're kind of hitting is that everybody's nuance and difference, but it's not like we often measure ourselves against people, and it's as much as the frameworks could be similar. You're your own person, and I think that segues into this problem with people starting a carnivore diet. They don't eat enough because they have it in their mind on the plate. We've talked a little bit about this before. That you have your meat and 2 veg, whatever your plate looks like. You don't realize the amount of food or nutrition you're not actually getting that way. And when you start getting nourished, it can be very counterintuitive. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, guys.
Yeah, no, 100%, definitely.
Peter,
it's a
I'm thinking. I'm also thinking like 100% and. Nothing to add right away, actually.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like the Ben Bickman adage is prioritize protein, fill up with fat, and control your carbohydrates. That may mean do not eat them, but that's a very kind of good alliteration to kind of sort of model yourself. But I see it all the time. People and it's really hard when you're doing when you're coaching or helping somebody via not watching them eat because. People often minimize that. So look at the food, look at our epidemiology's food surveys, guys. How many eggs you eat last year, Peter? Right? How many eggs?
Yeah.
Right? Give or take, right? So when people
10,000?
when someone tells me they ate a big steak, I'm like, I don't think you understand what a big steak is. I can eat a big steak, and it's not to somebody when I used to work at a steakhouse. A 12-ounce New York was huge. Yeah. Now, man, that's not even
easy.
It's not even half.
No problem.
So it's kind of interesting how that perception sort of shifts when you're not filling up with other stuff. Butter.
Yeah, we used to have that over here as well. We used to have a steakhouse here 8 years ago, and they had this large steak, and it was huge. Yeah. And they were like, if you finish it, then you don't pay for your meal.
Wow.
And so many people couldn't finish it because it was so big. But when I look back at it now, I could polish that in 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Yeah, no,
easily.
Yeah. If it were chicken though, then for me that 12-ounce would be already impossible to eat.
Really?
Chicken is something I can just not stomach it. For me, it's not meat, basically.
You know what? It's funny with chicken, and that's the other thing too with people that say that carnivore doesn't have variety. I mean, I see a lot of times on social media, you have great. Courtney Luna's got a good cookbook. for me, at my carnivore evolution, little plug there, Mark. My carnivore evolution is I just don't have time anymore. I just don't care because like all the cloud breads and the egg stuff, and I'm at the point now where I'll just cook the steak, or I'll just make the meat. That's it.
Yeah.
Cook the eggs. But if people need variety and you want to get a little chefy, look at every French sauce that's ever been known is eggs and fat. Like you can make béarnaise, hollandaise, all that stuff. It's like carnivore, man.
Yeah. I cannot help it somehow, and I know that there are exceptions, or maybe it's not even a general rule, but if I see people talking about all these keto recipes, keto cakes, or carnivore cakes, pancakes, and all these things, I always suspect that there is still something not totally right. Either somebody is missing some nutrients, or there is still some addiction in the background. And I'm sure it's not always the case, and there are also mothers with their children, and even I have made carnivore pancakes once with my son, for example. So it's fun to do, but I think if you make a YouTube channel about carnivore pancakes all the time, that sort of stuff.
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
That's the other thing with people don't realize that you can, like, if you plan it, and I'm sure, Mark, with your clients and the people you've helped, and the same thing, you plan a strategy to build up to something. You can use things as bridges. Like you can use, like, so for a time you gotta make some cloud bread because you're good, but understand why. Do you need it to live on it? And I mean, I think that's very nuanced because a lot of people just, I think that the programming and the sugar addiction and like all that stuff that we've been programmed, like it's okay to eat things in moderation, balanced diet. It's hard to let go of, and I think that's the thing. I mean, sometimes using it as a bridge as a tool to get to a better place or a more, more sustainable diet. There's a place for it. But I actually agree with you, Peter. I think there's probably a lot more things because like what we said, most people don't admit certain things, and it's just a natural human instinct. But I often like look at things and try to get into why. And I look at now I eat from a of course I love, don't get me wrong, steak is delicious, but I eat now for health. I don't eat for entertainment. And I'm not saying there's a place to go out and enjoy a meal with friends and family. I mean, obviously if it could be just the turkey, I would like it better. But I understand there's like we've been, people celebrate, and it's but the problem is we've been celebrating for decades and we haven't been focusing on our health. So now it's going to do some work. But
great point. Yeah, great point. At the end of the day, I did it the same. For years, I was just focusing on how there was so much pressure on me because I work in the fitness community to look a certain way. Yeah. And for years I did that. For years I had to look. Come January, I had to look the part, otherwise people wouldn't take me serious. So I always did this constant restriction, diets, all this shit. I was just putting my body through unbelievable stress. I could never get to a point in my life where I was like, what's the word I'm looking for? Where I was just happy.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
I was never there. I was never ever there. And when I look back at it and the amount of sacrifices I did to look a certain way and damage my own health, that I've always said the biggest, I have many regrets in my life, but the biggest regret I have is that I wish somebody told me about carnivore about 30 years ago.
Yeah, you know what? Unfortunately, Mark, like by the way by the way their awareness is, like a lot of people, I mean, it happened to me. I didn't want to hear it. Like it was in front of my face 6 years ago. And I was like, that's ridiculous. So I think people, like we talked about, one person at a time, just warming up to the idea that it is possible. And it's a progression. Like, if you just start becoming aware of this, and just what I can't handle is the people the influencers or the doctors that just panic, that just say, oh, it's not good. Like, how can you tell somebody, Peter, present company included, Peter's story. How can you tell him that he's doing something wrong and not sustainable and it's just him when he's had these, since he's done his stuff, he's come out of it with a way more manageable disease, a way more comfortable life, and obviously he just admitted you're happier. You know what I mean? Like, and so someone comes around the corner that's not type 1 diabetic, that's a doctor or an influencer, and just says, don't listen to him because he's wrong. And that's where I start to go like, you know, it's horrifying. I think that's a big up in this space too, right? Like you get those roadblocks, right? And man, it's like, Mark, you have videos every day about this stuff. And I'm like, everybody, Fitness Beyond Time 01 on Instagram and TikTok, please listen to this guy. Write that down. Well, you boys, we're pushing an hour here, so maybe we should just wind it up. And I think this was great because, you know, what we're trying to do, everybody, is we're trying to come at you with real sort of, we're not doctors, we're not scientists, we're just having real conversations. We all have our different experiences. You know, I know for a fact, if you need some help or you want to know about type 1 diabetes, like Peter, you've got a specific channel for that, type 1 diabetic carnivore.
Yeah, it's becoming a bit dusty now, but luckily people know to find me now on my main channel, also for diabetes related stuff. So
good. And,
I'm happy about that.
And I will like when I found Peter's channel, like I appreciate his wit and his way of, you know, kind of coming at the normies with, and I think Peter, you do a great job about, you know, kind of bringing your own little charm and the information.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't realize that.
I know.
Well, we actually don't have carnivore in our names, but people will, when they see our channels, they'll think that we are carnivores. And yes, our personal diets is carnivore, but I think all three of us, we are very into the entire low carb spectrum and actually also other dietary approaches if it works.
Nutrition. Yeah. Right? Like we had Jenni on, and Jenni's, you know, she's got her thing that she was sort of letting people know. And I mean, to be honest with you, I'm more of a person that's like, I've helped vegans be better vegans. When they changed their outlook on, okay, I'm not, and they were religious. They had to be. So I can understand that. But that doesn't change the fact that the body needs essential nutrients. Doesn't, and we take the dogma, take the ethics, take everything out of the equation. If you tell me you will not eat animals because that's your choice, I can live with that. And I'm very happy to support that. But you got to know that there's certain holes you have to fill. When those virtue signals start becoming preaching and pushing, you know, it's just not, there's so many holes. And I mean, I encourage anybody that is doing well and thriving, great. But, you know, for the layman and someone who's, I was going to go vegan and I realized it was wrong. That's me. And I'm me. But and I think that's a big thing. And Mark, how do people find you? And, you know, let them know where you can be reached.
So if you want, so Tony mentioned my name earlier on. So I'm Fitness Beyond Time on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Or if you want to send me an email, you can send me an email at ennismark93@gmail.com.
And don't forget, Mark's got a Carnivore Evolution podcast on Spotify with some great guests, some great interviews. I don't know. One might have been there. I might have known something like that. Maybe Peter.
And we're gonna do another. We're gonna do another one very, very soon.
Right on, yeah. And that's on Spotify. And of course, I am here on YouTube at Food for Thought, Question Everything at Tony Stewart Coach. Like Mark said, you know, when you're looking for some help, if you're looking for some help, if you find somebody you resonate with, just, you know, reach out to them. And if you need some guidance and some help, I know we're all very approachable. You can find me on TikTok and YouTube at Tony Stewart Coach or Tony Food for Thought. Anyway, we'll post all the links to all of us below. And please, we'd love to hear your stories. We love the real people aspect. We're coming at you from a no bullshit, real people, real stories. We had Victoria Olson on an interview last week. We just posted it on my channel. I think Peter might put it out on his. And we're doing this. If you want to come on and you have a story to share, we want to talk to real people. We're all about that, spreading this word. The Meat of the Matter podcast is Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Holland Dutch time, 6 p.m. UK Irish time on Sundays. Live Q&A. Join us. We'd love to see you there. Thanks, guys. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
See you.